Well, as we all know, women are making incredible strides, claiming their space in the world of work. We spoke about that and the challenges still surrounding that yesterday, and what was a big day for women in South Africa. But studies, I'm afraid, still show that many are feeling they work two shifts, day and night, if you will. During the day, it's spent working in the corporate arena. That's then followed by being a mum or a wife in the evenings as well. It never does stop. And of course, we then try and have a discussion around balance. But Investec Careers Head, it's Nicola joining us now to talk about that pursuit only leading, Nicola, good morning, that pursuit only leading to frustrations and I would imagine later on burnout as well. It's just not sustainable, is it? Good morning.
Good morning. Gareth, no, it's not. I think the concept of balance is actually flawed in its own definition. You know, balance is about time. And I think corporates have to move to understand that what we're looking for in terms of value is output and performance. It's kind of like perfection. One can just never achieve perfection. So we've always gone after this goal that kind of just doesn't exist. You know, also in your personal life, it's also not about the time spent. It's about quality engagement. So I think the concept of balance is probably archaic, and I think we have to move to something more like integration. Because balance also means that there are different aspects of my life that I break up, which is a difficult concept when you're a human being in a workplace and in personal life.
I suppose the argument, and it's an age-old argument, which maybe held more water, Nicola, before COVID-19, and I think we all learned what hybrid work actually looks like as well, though. But companies, and you do get those companies that will turn around and say, it's unlucky and it's your problem if you've decided to start a family and you want to be a mom in the evening after working all day at work. It's a choice that you've made outside of the office. We can't be held responsible for how it's affecting your job at work. It's an archaic way of thinking, but it's still there, isn't it?
It is there, unfortunately, in some organizations. Others are getting far more progressive in the way that they think about policies, around principles, etc. Lots of organizations are moving towards thinking about parents in the workplace versus mothers, which really actually does help us in terms of gender transformation and the thinking. There are many gentlemen in the workplace that are just as dedicated now in taking up their role, which hopefully will influence and balance out the societal imperfections that we've lived with for such a long time. So I think organizations will lose out on talent if they're going to get stuck in the past and stuck in ways of thinking such as that. We really need to progress policies, and we really need to progress leadership's thinking around creating the context for you to be both.
How do you begin to do that, though? Let's, for example, imagine there's a company now, say a medium-sized company, that is being pressured by employees to have more work-life balance. How does a company begin to have that conversation without giving up too much of their control over work hours and ensuring that productivity is still there? Where does a company begin to have this conversation?
So I think it's a leadership conversation. That's where the conversation has to exist. Leadership has to give people permission to take up both of these roles, and leadership has to shift their thinking around one or the other. If leaders don't understand that well-being is going to be one of the most critical aspects of employee experience in organizations, again, they're going to lose out. But you can have brilliant policies, you can have exceptional practices, you can have a culture that adopts this all. But if leaders don't lead it in terms of giving people permission, it will never be taken up. So I think it really starts there, and it's shifting hearts and minds of leadership in organizations. Otherwise, you can, as I say, put brilliant stuff in place to support it structurally, but nothing will ever change.
Give me the nuts and bolts of that. What does it look like, though? Yes, you can have those leadership discussions in an ideal world that'll filter down to the lower rungs of a company. But on a day-to-day basis, Nicola, what would you actually like to see happen? Are we talking hybrid work? Are we working maybe 4 days a week, where we have a 4-day week instead of a 5-day week? In your world, what's the nuts and bolts of that?
Well, I think one of the first things is actually getting women into leadership roles. So firstly, when you are having that conversation, it's not a one-sided conversation, because, again, bringing different genders into leadership spaces will obviously create the best solution, because you're going to have diversity of thought. Female leaders also bring a slightly different concept and aspect in some of their thinking around empathy, mentorship, creating space for people to be, their holistic, authentic selves. So first of all, I think it's that. We've got to see transformation at leadership levels in organizations and see different genders there. The second thing is, yes, I think it does come to practicality around what is our organization's culture, what are the values of this culture, what are we going to stand for, and then disseminate it all the way down into how have you written your policies, what does maternity leave look like, how do we define work hours, do we even need to define work hours, or is that an irrelevant concept because we are able to work hybrid or because we understand that the value is the output and not the time. So I think it cascades all the way from understanding the leadership concept, but then down to structurally. How do you employ people? How do you onboard them? How do they take up their roles? So I think it's moving away again, I have to say, around that time-based thinking to really value and contribution and performance. It's actually a commercial aspect of your business more than just a moral and the right thing to do. It's both and at the same time.
Let me ask you this in closing as well, Nicola. I feel like, and please disagree with me if you don't agree with what I'm saying, I get a sense this has become more of a focal point, this work-life balance, since we had COVID-19. We were all locked up, weren't able to leave their houses. There's some of us who had jobs like this where you have to come to a building to come and do it. But I feel like this work-life balance, it's always been sort of under the radar. But since we've come out of the pandemic, it's become a lot more prominent as well. And I suppose some companies could turn around and say, oh, the employees are just wanting the best of both out of this because they got used to working at home and they like to work in their pajamas. Do you feel like that's where we are?
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think COVID busted the myth that you have to be in a building in order to be doing your job. So the beauty of the bust was the fact that we could really think differently, and people got a sense of actually if you trusted people and you gave them the autonomy and freedom, but they had the discipline to take up their roles, they would hold a responsibility and deliver for you just as well as if they were sitting in the building with you in teams. With that said, there are organizations like our own that believe being in relationship with one another helps us to deliver quicker. So I am not sure that all organizations have gone fully virtual, and I truly understand why. Because some of the value is in working together, learning together, engaging together for the best delivery for the client and for your strategy. So I think it's not about a one-size-fits-all. I think it's about learning the incredible lessons that we did in COVID and not losing them. So we have to keep challenging, not just to go and default back to the format of the past, but take those learnings and then integrate them into what's going to be best for you.
Nicola, I hope a lot of companies are listening. I think there are those industries that just aren't able to do that as well. But I think at least, as you say, if there's a leadership discussion and if leadership is open to discussing it, maybe try and plot a way forward, especially after COVID-19.